Hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am going to do something a little serious today. This is because my daughter and I had this talk yesterday, and it was really interesting. And it was about she never shared it with me about how hard it hit her when she was a kid, and we went from Obama to Trump. And it's interesting to me because I hadn't thought about it through her lens, and in particular, her stage of development. And that's what I'm coming with today is because of that, I decided to go in and look at what Gen Z had to deal with as that cutover happened. And for my daughter, she was about 15 or 16, somewhere in there. And it was a big deal when it happened for her because that was right in her, like she was learning how to have agency, right? She was a teenager. She was learning how to drive. She was starting to be a real human person in the world where she could do stuff on her own. So it was a pivotal time. So what I have for us today is a quick look for anybody who knows someone that's Gen Z, loves someone that's Gen Z, um, has to talk with them about stuff. This might give you some more perspective on what through their heads and what the context was like. I just wrote a blog about how we forget that there's a wormhole, a Trump wormhole for all of us who have um, been generally traumatized by what's happened in the Trump administration. And I know people don't believe it, but there's legit science and legit studies that have been done, and it's a real thing. And it's one of the reasons we can't remember the Trump administration very well because the information we had got written in a weird way in our brains. So Robert Reich and other people are talking about this Trump fog we all seem to have, and it's true. And so I wanted to go back to that. I wanted to look at this through the lens of those kids. First of all, because I love kids, I just love them. They're fascinating, and that you can learn a lot from how they learn. But second of all, I think we need to be aware of what we did to these poor kids. Like this was quite a change for them. They Some of them were born right when Columbine happened. So that's how you kind of know the Gen Xers. Those were the millennials. Columbine was the millennials. So I remember my friend Lisa with her baby was born and I was pregnant. No, I just had Katie. Katie was in preschool. Sorry, but that was 9/11. So we had 9/11. We had Columbine happened before my daughter was born, but right at the same year. And then 9/11 happened a couple of years later. They were babies, they were toddlers. They didn't really know, but it certainly impacted us, right? So we get through the Bush administration, we go through a housing crisis in 2008, and we get Obama. And I know in my house, it was a happy place. It was a very happy place. The idea of somebody talking about hope was huge. So this is going to be a long podcast because I have a lot to say here, and let me get to it. So I, in my faith in the younger generation is huge. We rely on them, and we're going to need them in the years going forward. So we really need to help understand them, and then also help them succeed. It's really important that the kids that come after us succeed. I don't know why there's so many grumpy old people who don't want young people to succeed, but it's not in your best interest for young people to fail. I don't know how to say that anyway, other way. Anyway, these young people are going to make the decisions that affect my future. And I may have 30 more years, maybe 40. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not living hard. I want to get through them with the least amount of noise possible. The one good thing about Biden is he's just doing the work. It's so nice to have a president just doing the work. You can pretend all the stuff Trump says is true or not, but basically Biden's keeping the doors open, keeping the lights on. And not only that, he's running sales on there's blue light specials going on. There's good stuff happening. So I want to hear it. I just don't want to hear it. We shouldn't have to worry about the president. That's not a thing we worry about. We might be worried about a president's position on a thing. That's how it used to work. We would hate their position on a thing. Like I was not a fan of the Cheneys. No, bad. But it didn't mean we stopped functioning. Yeah, we had Gitmo. That was awful. But we didn't stop functioning. All right. So here's what happens with the developmental milestones. And so I want to set the stage here when the developmental milestones align with the presidency. Everybody kind of can remember. That's a big talk on Twitter, who they remember their first president, really remember their first president. I think my real memory, kind of Jimmy Carter, but mostly Reagan. A tiny bit of Jimmy Carter, barely, but mostly Reagan is who I remember. So that lands me right in. So Gen Z was born between 1997 and 2010. About 13 years. So these cohorts are getting a little more narrow because of the rate of change, but right in there, about a 13-year window. When Obama took office in 2008, they were 11 years old and younger, and he was their president for 8 crucial years. So around 10, 11, 8, 9, 10, 11, any in there, those little kids had Obama. That was what they got. Research shows social and political environments kids grow up in shape teenagers. So already that says your household matters. The household and who you're friends with matters, especially during adolescence when they're forming beliefs about society. So who you're exposing your kids to makes a difference. If you think it doesn't, you're a fool. It matters. It's actually one of the reasons why Hillary said it takes a village, because it does. All these people influence your children. Many people influence your children. And that's your job to make sure you're bringing in the right influences, right? So changes in leaders or authority figures can majorly impact how young people see their roles in the world. For instance, exposure to diverse and positive representation in media during Obama's presidency likely encouraged empathy and inclusivity. And in fact, these kids are kind of known for some of that, for being inclusive and almost intuitive, but that idea of inclusivity. It's funny, boys don't care about women having periods and they all just talk about it because they just removed a bunch of stupid old-fashioned bugaboos we had about topics. I'm trying to think there's a word for it, but those things that we never talked about. Shh. My mom, you couldn't even mention a period around my mom. She like the earth would open up and just swallow her in with her horror and fear and embarrassment and shame. The kids have changed all that. It's fantastic. So they're just empathy. They have empathy. They're inclusive. In contrast, Trump era exposure to polarized media often reinforced distrust and group bias. This contrasting environment from Obama to Trump created strong divisions affecting Gen Z's view of civic engagement, government trust, and diversity beliefs. You got it? So they went from everybody can play on the playground to you can't play on my playground unless I let you. These dramatically different environments created strong divisions among young people, affecting how they view civic engagement, trust in the government, and beliefs about diversity. For instance, teens under Obama's influence might have become more supportive of equality and democratic institutions. At the same time, those exposed to Trump-era messages might have adopted a more skeptical, divided outlook on these same values. So assimilating information is the child's job. That's what they do. I love them. I told the story. I didn't want to have kids forever because my parents always had me convinced the kids were the problem for all the things. But then I started studying developmental psychology and found out kids come preloaded with their own personalities, their own preferences, and their own everything. And that nature and nurture are an interesting dance. Once you figure out what they're born with and what you can help them become, that's just a golden moment, because the kid you gave birth to doesn't know you anything. They're their own person. Hey, all you anti-abortion folks, we're birthing unique individuals. That's important. So you need to honor that uniqueness and not try to stomp it out of them. That's the gift they bring you, is who they are. It's your job then to nurture that gift as they grow up, right? So between the ages of 7 and 15, children and teens experience several key social learning stages that reshape their understanding of themselves in the world. They are increasingly aware of social norms and rules. You suddenly other people are starting to tell you what to do. You learn that it's not okay to steal or other dumb things. It's funny how society kind of corrects you as a kid. Hey kid, don't ride your bike up there. Hey kid. There's all kinds of things that happen that help a kid understand the social rules and norms. Children begin developing empathy, learning to see things from others' perspectives, and understanding that people have different views and feelings. That's important. You get a kid who doesn't understand that, you might have to go to sociopath school. There you go. Maybe psychopath school. They also develop cooperative behaviors, recognizing the importance of inclusion and fair play. These are normal things that have a natural set point that we have to go break in our children. They don't perceive racism. They don't perceive judgment. That's not a thing for kids when they start. We build that into them. That's the nurture part, not something to be that proud of. All your fears right onto that kid. So they recognize the importance of inclusion and fair play, and they look to authority figures, and that's what's key, such as parents, teachers, community leaders, to set moral standards while they seek validation and guidance to help them build a sense of right and wrong. Just how you would expect how we acculturate a child and turn them into a member of society, right? Around the ages of 11 to 15, social learning intensifies as children enter adolescence. So peers become especially important. Yeah, that's when they kick you to the curb, as they explore their personal identity, and seek belonging within their social groups. During this stage, they become more independent from family influence, increasingly questioning authority and critically evaluating social norms and values. This is the testing age, right? And this is what we want, a healthy testing age. I don't want anyone in my life doing what I say because they believe me. I want them to be able to go, oh, yeah, she's right, because they've learned I'm trustworthy, or they've thought about it themselves and said that's a good idea. Just blind obedience is the worst thing on the planet. I'm sorry. It's just that it's how you dumb down the masses. Go see the lemmings. Lemmings are blind obedience. That's just not an intellectually curious way to be on this planet. It's also not really good for you. Just going to say it just like that. I'm going to judge you right now. So the teens forming these moral beliefs are highly impressionable, often looking to both real world and media figures to help shape their views on justice, fairness, and social responsibility. This is why we worry about our sports figures and our musicians and everybody else, right? Because they all become these interesting role models for our kids, including our presidents. And we need to make sure that they're following the role models that whose values we agree with and that we think are important for our children. So they will start to see, they'll start to participate in more nuanced understanding of complex social dynamics, such as inclusivity, bias, and systemic issues. They're going to start to pick up on that. Like, how come every time we go out, Jared is always asked for his ID, but nobody else is? Like, kids start to pick up on all that crap. Like, things are not the same for all of us. Some people are treated differently. That's when they start to pick this up in their teenage years, and it'll shape their sense of civic duty and empathy to others as they mature. A healthy, good, well-raised child who believes everybody has a right to be here and is a fair and free human being will come through this. They'll pull that through with them. So here's what's now I started to apply this the two ways. So here I'm going to bifurcate the story is the thing. I started to look at this in two ways. Kids that were raised in Obama households and kids that were raised in Trump households. And the Trump house and sorry, at first they're not that. First they're Obama households and anti-Obama, right? Because we know there was a huge crowd of anti-Obama people. So first, if a family was pro-democracy, pro-Obama, the experience was positive. So during those presidential years, and I know this firsthand account, my daughter was down with the Obamas. Like, she pursued, she was, I think, 8 to 16. Yeah, those were her years, right? 8 to 16. She was all about the climate stuff. She was about the reading. She was about the eating naturally. These are still her values today. She's pulled me over. I barely eat meat anymore. Barely. She pulled me over the line because I started to see the value in how she was making choices, and I changed some of my beliefs. So that's what's happening now. If you're in a pro-Obama household, and this is working, it's working well. For older Gen Zs, so these are the ones that are a little older, they're not the babies, because remember, Gen Z goes all the way up to 2010, and that's after Obama was president. So I'm not talking about babies and toddlers. I'm talking about really kind of 4 years old up, 5 years old up, where you start to put this stuff together. You're starting to understand how the world works. For the older Gen Z kids, Obama's election marked a significant shift. As a pro-kid, pro-human president, he and Michelle actively opened the White House and government to young people through several proactive programs. I don't know if we all remember how big of a deal this was, but because they had two daughters roughly the same age as other Gen Zers, they're a little tiny bit older, but essentially about the same age. I don't know if they're older. They might actually really be Gen Z kids. They were very, very into kids. Like, that was a big deal in the White House. Their efforts were really impactful because kids are naturally eager to understand how things work and want the opportunity to engage. So their emphasis, the Obama's administration emphasis on diversity and inclusivity shape children's values around acceptance, anti-bullying, and service to others, which is just, it was anti-bullying. That was actually a proactive stance during the Obama years. Stop bullying. Stop it. Okay. Sorry, it just cracks me up because it was so oriented towards healthy families. Both Obama and Michelle spoke directly to young people all the time, by the way, reinforcing the importance and in an appropriate voice, in an appropriate message and an appropriate tone. And they reinforced the importance of respecting differences and supporting the community's well-being. Michelle had initiatives like Let's Move and her advocacy for educational opportunity. It highlighted the need for collective responsibility and equality. And kids in these environments would have absorbed these messages, encouraged them to value inclusive spaces where everyone's well-being is prioritized. She just wanted people to move. I still hear Michelle in my head, let's move. A really good message. And it was so easy for kids. Get how easy that is? Like, let's go. Get your parents walking. It was brilliant. They turned the kids on the parents. It was really effective. Moreover, Obama's message of hope and civic engagement inspired young people to believe in a better future and see their role in shaping it. Families in this era likely encouraged empathy, responsibility towards others, aligning with democratic values, respecting choices, respecting voices. They implemented policies that uplifted marginal communities. The administration set an example that implicitly challenged racial and social superiority ideas. They were actually fighting racism, like they went after it. Kids growing up with these messages would have seen democracy as inherently inclusive, fostering a worldview that leaned toward unity and civic responsibility. That's the other advantage of having a president that's talking to kids. They're starting to understand how to participate in their own government, how to do things that can help move initiatives forward that kids cared about. Katie cared so much about the trash gyra, or however you say it, gyre. I don't know how you say it. All the frickin' plastic out in the ocean. She cared so much about that. Our house, it was her science fair project. Our house turned into this giant project about every kind of plastic. This kid in plastic, I'm so hyper aware. You would not believe how much she changed my habits around conservation, climate. I was already pretty paranoid and responsible. I was growing up in California. We don't use water for freaking anything, right? Don't flush if you don't have to. It's crazy. Southern California in particular, very water starved. So, but Katie was able to actually influencing me even more on how I buy merchandise. Mom, don't buy big plastic jugs. Buy the stuff that you can add water to. Like, she just made a bunch of decisions that changed us for her life, that changed my life too. And it was a lot because of having a presidency that talked to kids. It sounds so obvious. Okay. During their time in the White House, I already told like all this, the Let's Move. They also did a Reach Higher initiative, further motivating students from all backgrounds to pursue higher education. And that got me so fired up. I was doing talks at Katie's middle school about college because the kids, even though we have UCSC on the Hill, they'd never been there. I happen to live in a poor district. A lot of our kids had never been up to the college. It's a college right in our town, and they just hadn't been there. They did it. I don't know why. I don't know why their parents aren't just curious, but they wouldn't, a child parent has to know what a college is to feel comfortable to show up on one. They, of course, watch Jim Rockford. I asked permission for nothing, but there you go. So he also championed diversity, equality, and tolerance, LGBTQ rights, racial equality, and same-sex marriage. This was an administration of like validating everyone. That's what happened in the Obama administration. And the reason that's important for you to like just sit with that is that that's what these kids grew up knowing, that it was okay to be. You could be whoever you wanted to be, and it was okay. Nobody was going to judge you or hurt you or kill you like Matthew Shepard on a fence. It just restored hope. So Obama was committed to environmental responsibility. That's the one that got my daughter with Paris Climate Agreement, and my brother's keeper, which was about helping young men of color through mentorship and job training. Holy crap, that's amazing. So those are all the kind of positive things that were literally coming out of the White House during our children's childhood. But if you were anti-Obama and you grew up in a racist household during this time, and an anti-Black household, I called it a white supremacist household, because I don't know what else to call them now. So I just feel like MAGA is just white supremacists, right? Children likely grew up with a strong distrust of authority. We've seen that already. You can't trust anything, right? Especially towards the Obama administration. So they taught their children to not trust the presidency. Exposure to negative media portrayals with family skepticism about the government led these kids to view political leaders as inept or corrupt, reinforcing a sense of wariness towards authority figures. So here you see it building. It was happening long before now. I'm not saying it just turned on, but I'm just saying if you look at this cohort of kids, that's what's important to me right now. These 16-year-olds and these 16-year-olds are having a diametrically opposed growing up experience. The democracy kids are thinking America's great and we can do this. And frankly, I feel like it's everyone who's like fighting against the abortion regulations, right? Everybody wants to conquer Dodd. I feel like they were so on board with Obama. They understood America. And then there were these other people who raised their children to not trust anyone, be skeptical of all things. Nothing is true. It reinforced a sense of wariness towards authority figures, and it would have fostered a critical, often cynical outlook on government, especially those focused on inclusion and equity. So there's a whole bunch of humans that actually raise their children to specifically distrust everything, hate others, and really decide that there's us and them. The beliefs about racial and cultural hierarchies were emphasized, casting diversity and inclusivity initiatives as threats to traditional values. And that's how they did it, by bringing in the church. The Worldview framed efforts to uplift marginalized communities as undermining norms. This was the problem. It was a zero-sum game for these guys, right? Because if they had rights, then that means I somehow didn't. And that's where everything went wrong. I mean, that's literally how these people were manipulated, but that kind of thinking is why I think we see such skewed polls now on votes, with like white males for Trump and white females not necessarily for Trump, because they know that their bodies are being legislated against. It's crazy how big this divide is with the peoples. But if you look at how they grew up, it kind of makes some sense now. When Trump was elected, the anti-Obama kids were socially rewarded. So here's the thing that's weird. So now you take these kids that we grew up in the Obama administration, these young people who really had hopes and inspirations and excitement, and we slammed the door on them. We slammed the door on them, and we told them, no, here's what we're going to have now. And we're going to reward the people that were hated. We're going to reward the haters. We elected Trump, and we're going to reward the haters. When Trump won, children and teens in pro-Trump households experienced a marked shift in social and political climate that began to shape their worldview. So they've been told that everybody's wrong, bad, and scary during the Obama administration. Now here he comes, your hero, the man who's coming to save the day. Trump's rhetoric around nationalism and skepticism towards media, along with his questioning of certain democratic norms, created an us versus them mentality. So he came in and put a candle right on top and lit that candle. Here's the cake I'm going to give you, the cake of hate. For the young people who are forming their beliefs in this environment, these messages normalized a view of society as deeply divided. Can't think, it's sickening that Trump is normalizing anything, but that's what he did. The consistent emphasis on strong nationalistic values reinforced the idea that loyalty to certain ideals meant rejecting those seen as others, fostering a perspective that embraced exclusion over inclusion. As the teenagers came of age, they witnessed and absorbed a cultural landscape where conservative values were increasingly validated overtly when accompanied by resistance from diversity initiatives. So if you fight, they didn't just have an argument like a debate. They crushed people like a bug. The GOP would just crush you. It's the meanness. I've written about it, and it feels like a million times. But it's this meanness and this cruelty, which is what keeps people constantly having kind of to protect their own personal safety while they're coming at you. The cultural validation of these ideas further solidified divisions, creating a generational impact that hardened views on inclusivity, media trust, and social identity, often shaping these teens into adults with deep divisive perspectives. That's going to be our long-term problem right there. It's the anti-Obama, pro-Trump families that raised their children during these years and then let them just run amok when Trump came in. Those people, the generally white people, but I know we've managed to suck some minorities in there, and I don't know what they're thinking. But generally white people have gotten so fixed in this hate fest that they can't get out of it. But they literally raised their children to be like this. So we're going to have a long-term problem here. There are more Obama kids than there are Trump kids. Let's be clear. But still, we're still going to have what everybody talks about. What is the underlying problem? What is this god-awful problem we have? Well, here's where some of it started. Here's what the kids heard from Donald and Melania. So I talked about what the Obamas were doing in the White House. When Trump came in, here's what he decided to do. The Trump administration's outreach to children was less direct than the Obama administration's, but specific initiatives, appearances, and social media messages still reached younger audiences. Get ready. This is unintentional, with one exception. And the first exception is Melania's Be Best campaign focused on children's well-being, not their use of grammar, but their well-being, particularly around social media use, which is hilarious because children are supposed to be on social media until they're about 13. But that's where she went. It was also ironic, but okay. She went about social media use, cyberbullying, and the opioid crisis, aiming to promote kindness and responsible digital behavior. However, the campaign faced criticism for seemingly being at odds with Donald Trump's combative online persona, which became part of the broader public discussion. Yeah, she was undone. There could be nothing more tone deaf than Be Best, aside from its bad grammar. It also was her telling people what to do, not do as I say, not as I do. It was one of those. Do as I say, not as I do, because her husband, her adoring husband, was off being a complete bag of shit. Melania also visited children's hospitals and schools, emphasizing kindness and compassion in the face of adversity. However, her outreach was often underreported and thus less visible than that of previous first ladies. And while not addressing young people directly, Donald Trump did participate in events like, wait a minute, I gotta reread this sentence. It's so good. While not addressing young people directly, except for maybe that boy on his lawn, Donald Trump did participate in events like the White House Easter egg roll, which offered a brief public connection with children and families up on the balcony. I think he was playing with Sean Spicer in the rabbit suit. Was that what I remember? Holy smokes. Trump's intent, but he didn't, not addressing the young people. He just looked over them. Trump's intense and off, sorry, it just cracks me up. He's so bad with kids. He's so bad with kids. Trump's intense and often polarizing social media presence also reached teens, as his unfiltered communication style was widely discussed in youth circles, influencing views on leadership and digital behavior. His Make America Great Again slogan became a cultural marker, with some kids adopting it through clothing, and discussion. Televised rallies to supporters of all ages, exposing children to Trump's messages around nationalism and media skepticism. This is so important. None of this content is for children that Trump's spewing, but he knows children are seeing it, and parents are taking their kids to hear him speak, which is similarly vulgar. His frequent criticisms of mainstream media as the enemy of the people likely influenced how young people from Trump supporting households perceive the press, creating divides in views of media credibility. And the administration's focus on patriotism, the military, law enforcement reinforced a sense of pride in national symbols, but often emphasized conservative values. So he took some of the things that kids are often interested in, police, the soldiers. That's a cool thing. The kids like to look at soldiers. I find military both horrifying and fascinating because I know there's military strategy, which is really interesting to me. It's probably right up there with political strategy, except way different because it's not political strategy, it's military strategy. But it's interesting to me to think through what they think people are going to do next. Like Elon Musk owning all these things and then being in cahoots with Trump and being one of his political action committees that's not supposed to talk to Trump at all. Like, I want to know exactly what's going to happen next. If Elon can promote Trump on X, who else is he promoting on X? What other countries is he messing with? Like, that's military strategy to me. Figure out, like, what's the long tail here? What's the real end game? I know Elon wants America, but he can mess with any country's political structure through Twitter and through his wealth. What is his long game? That's like a military strategy to me. Okay. So Trump's anti-establishment rhetoric exposed young people to polarized political conversations and divisive perspectives on race, immigration, and patriotism, and has shaped their views on some of these topics. So that's what happened for the kids that were raised in households that to not like Obama. Trump shows up. He doesn't really have any programs for kids. He doesn't really talk to kids, but he reaches them and they become fast and locked in their belief systems. But there's a whole bunch of kids who believed in Obama and got Trump. And here's what happened to them. So now you're in a household where my kid, she's all Obama. She's super engaged. She did tons of civic stuff. She was like an ambassador thing. She did youth Global Youth Forum. She did leadership stuff. I sent her all that crap because I loved it as a kid and I wanted her to be exposed to other cultures and other ways. If I wanted her to be a leader, I needed her to think about how other people's opinions matter, right? I wanted her to learn how to do that kind of coalition building as a young person, because when you learn it, then it becomes part of your skill set, right? So this was my daughter then. For the young people raised during Obama's presidency, the transition to Trump's administration brought a striking shift on the national landscape, often prompting them to revisit and reinforce the values they had formed under Obama's influence. So many who embraced the ideals of inclusivity, empathy, and civic responsibility saw Trump's election as a regression, catalyzing, and this would be the older kids, right? These are the ones with the most maturity because they can actually understand they have the ability to fight back. Not sure Katie quite understood that. She did and she didn't. I think what she saw is that fighting back didn't win. That's what she saw. So she got defeated pretty quickly. But we did have some amazing kids who went out and did some things, who didn't get down by this. So many who embraced the ideals of inclusion and empathy and civic responsibility saw this as a regression, and they catalyzed a wave of activism. The perceived departure from progressive policies and inclusive rhetoric encouraged them to become more politically engaged, participating in movements like March for Our Lives and the Women's March. And this is true, the youngsters did show up. By taking to the streets and organizing online, the young people found a way to channel their beliefs into collective action, taking an active stand for causes they believed are now at risk. Now, this wasn't true for all of them. Some of them were depressed. Many of them were depressed. This era also solidified a focus on social justice, as these young adults felt an urgency to protect and promote values like equity, democracy, and environmental sustainability. This, as far as I know, is still true. I watch some podcasters that are Gen Z. These are the things they care about. The LGBTQIA. You guys want to keep going after transgender kids? I'm going to tell you, these are their friends, and they're not going to have it. So you can get away with it for about another 4 or 5 years. It's going to come back on your ass. Quit attacking the little people. Transgender people don't want anything to do with you. Oh my God. And we're talking about maybe 4 athletes, 4 in the whole goddamn US who are making people upset about sports. First of all, you people in your sports need to calm down. But second of all, it's 4 people, and you're out making laws. 4 people. You have a whole crowd of GOP people who are spreading lies about FEMA and acting like lunatics and haters and want to prison everybody. And Trump's called for the purge. But those 4 transgender people, they're really ruining it for all of us. Sorry. Okay. The experiences these kids have had is they have a deep commitment to social causes. I believe that's true. They defend democratic values and environmental protection. They seek social justice, and they have a drive to confront social and political changes head on. All true, but they have to know their vote matters. And that's the most important thing. So that's how I'm wrapping this up, because if you know what they've gone through socially and emotionally, I'll try to hybrid that word, I don't know why, then you can know how to approach them and get them involved and invite them into the tent. So to reach an Obama kid, let's say you want to go out and reach and talk to these kids and possibly talk to them about voting. To reach an Obama kid, someone who grew up during the Obama administration and values inclusivity, diversity, and civic engagement, you'll want to appeal to their sense of justice. These are principled kids. They care about the things that matter, and they see the life ahead of them, not being sure that they can A, live in a house because they can't afford to own one, and B, they may never have children because they don't know if their children will be allowed to live. They're seeing what's happening in the climate. They're seeing what's happening with food. We're going to have food and water shortages soon as this climate change continues. We have chaos in housing. They're not sure if they're going to have children. So, but what they're seeing is the social justice. They want justice back. These Obama kids are likely to respond to hope and progress and collective action messages. In fact, Kamala nailed it, didn't she? She came out at that convention and she spoke to their beautiful hearts. I've never seen Gen Z more fired up because she brought them back in. She reminded them of the Obama years, which is a huge activator for them. Emphasize, if you're going to talk to these Obama kids, emphasize the importance of continuing the work of social justice and protecting democracy Frame your message around shared values like empathy, fairness, a belief in a better future, and highlight an opportunity for them to become civically engaged or an activist, ways they can fight that align with their values. They won't have a ton of money, but they've got very healthy legs and very healthy chests, and they can go out and knock doors and write letters. So find them, take them with you. It's such kryptonite when I go out by myself because people just look at me like an old lady. If I take Katie, my whole day changes. I get such different discussions happen because well, partly because we're funny together, but also because she just brings a different energy to the exchange. So I love it. Go hang out with some kids and be sure to focus on solutions and empowerment and actionable steps. They want to be part of positive change. Now, here's the deal. How are we going to reach those Trump kids? The ones who were taught to hate Obama, hate Black people, hate progressives, hate change, hate social justice, hate everything except maggots. It's going to be different. A Trump kid is more complex. Their beliefs are more rooted in skepticism of institutions and media, and they are much more influenced by nationalistic or conservative values. So avoiding a confrontation that directly challenges their identity beliefs is essential to reach them. So you can't go in hot and say, you. You got to go in and say, tell me about that. Tell me why that's important to you and tell me how that's going to move us forward. That's probably a really big question for them. What do you think that means for everybody without making it seem like everybody is people they hate? Like think it through. Like, for example, vote for Trump. Here's a good example to me. All my life, as I paid Social Security and my checks, I knew I was paying for my grandma and then eventually my mom, right? I'm putting system in, my brain rationalizes, I'm paying for them. My grandfather was alive, part of him. Now, if we were to help kids understand that if their grandparents aren't going to get Social Security, their parents and their grandparents aren't going to have that safety net, they're going to be on the hook for taking care of their parents. Now, they might not. They might choose not to. So be it. Kids don't have to support their parents. That's not written anywhere. But I bet Obama kids will. The Trump kids, you can scare them if they don't know how their mom's going to be taken care of if there's no Social Security. So that's how to make the pivot where it still becomes about their interests. You kind of twist it around and just extrapolate into their interests. Focus on common ground like patriotism, the need for strong communities or economic opportunities. Those are another one too, jobs. Engaging with the message of practical solutions such as job readiness, entrepreneurship, or local involvement can be a more compelling entry point with the Trump kids. Avoid framing the conversation in overly partisan terms and instead approach with a focus on shared values, security, family, community. And over time, building that trust will let them feel comfortable arguing with you about things. So that's good. So that's how you're going to do it. Kamala says it all the time, meet them where they are. And that doesn't mean like get in the car and go down to Sonic, but that could be where they are. You're not going to have a lot of luck in that conversation, but meet them where they are. Like if you're sitting with some young people in the church and you're talking about things and the kids seem mean, talk to them about it. It's okay to confront. It's a technique I use, which I confront the behavior, right? Confront the anger, confront the skepticism, confront the confusion. Just say, you seem angry about this. Why would you be angry? Or tell me, like, why does that make you feel angry? That's a good way to meet them where they are. Then you come in and you start to have that common ground. So the last thing is that I want to say that, the tent is big in the Democratic Party and everyone's welcome. And if you don't know what that means, in politics, one big tent in the old days, they used to go around and campaign in big tents like a carnival. You come in, bring up a show, tent up, and have everybody here and have everybody come listen to you talk. Well, that's what the tent comes from, and it refers to the movement that welcomes a wide range of beliefs, values, and backgrounds under a shared vision. The metaphor suggests that, like a large tent with enough space to shelter many people, the party is inclusive of diverse viewpoints. This is why no president's going to ever do everything we want them to do, because we all have different viewpoints. We want a president, though, that's going to make good decisions based on sound advice that is pro-democracy, and that's pro-America, not pro anything else. So that's why a big, broad tent can be noisy and confusing, and people can fight each other inside the tent, but still we're under the same tent because we believe in the same fundamentals. The Democratic Party in the U.S. has often been identified as a big tent party, bringing together liberals, progressives, centrists, libertarians, and even more conservative Democrats to pursue common priorities like healthcare, civil rights, protecting democracy. Thank you, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say. At times, the Republican Party has taken a Big Ten approach to include both moderate and conservative voices, but the goal to appeal larger, believing that strength lies in numbers and diversity that can help the party win elections, doesn't work well for the Republicans. Unfortunately, the party routinely fails as the voting starts to tighten in the end, and the call for hate and division repels people who want more for America. Their tent is not big. You kind of really have to sign up all the way. And right now you really, really do, because it's racist, borderline Nazi language coming out of Trump now. So you really have to be clear you're signing up all the way. And that's why, in a time of ideological divides, understanding the distinct experiences of Gen Z under Obama and Trump is crucial for engaging with them effectively. Reaching both these groups require compassion and respect for their unique perspectives, recognizing that formative years shaped their worldviews in powerful ways. And by focusing on shared values and practical solutions, we can bridge divides and foster a generation ready to address the challenges of tomorrow. This is our future, guys. These kids are our future. And how we collectively raise them at this point, because they're all of maturity. 2012, they're 10. Okay. The little ones coming up who really are almost more like alpha, Gen Alpha. The little ones coming up, we probably won't have as much impact on, but Joe Biden has. But Trump, see, the problem is we still have Trump toxicity everywhere. And that is really the problem. We really need the toxicity to go away so we can recover and begin to change the minds of all these people that were brainwashed during the anti-Obama years. Thank you for listening today. I have a great polling guy, Stephen Luchman, who's coming on to talk about polling. He's out of Montana. He's an active pollster, and he will share with us what he's seeing and what we should pay attention to, what we shouldn't pay attention to, and how polls tell weird stories. So tune in for that tomorrow. Thank you for listening.